Hello, hello, and welcome to our 2024 year-end webinar. Um, we are just having some people rolling in, and we're going to get started real soon. So thank you all for joining us. Again, we have attendees rolling in as we speak, so we're going to give it just a few more seconds here to let everyone filter in, and then we will get started. So thank you for coming to the 2024 Management One Year-End Roundtable webinar. We will get started in just a few moments here.
I can tell you, Dane, that my heart's a pumping and my corpuscles are a jumping. This is going to be a great 45 minutes. I
We
also
have a,
like how Dane talks very slowly as he gets the intro going, which is absolutely a professional touch.
Thank you, Paul. I try.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we could kick off here. We'll let some more people roll in and we will get started. So welcome, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is my personal favorite event of the year, mainly because I get to be with my colleague, my mentor, my best friend, Paul Erickson. Thank you for joining me today, Paul.
Thanks, Dane. It's great to be with you. I think we're going to have a fun 45 minutes. It's going to be a lot of give and take, and hopefully everybody will learn something and will find it entertaining. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It'll be better than cats. So.
Yeah. So this is the first of our year-end webinar series. We'll have more coming up. But today's topic is shocker. Underbuying is crushing your sales. So let's go over the rules of engagement and then we'll go into the agenda. Just a reminder to everyone, we'd love for you to participate in this webinar. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. So as we're talking, please feel free to chime in with your questions. We'll get to them at the end and we'll be able to answer specific questions. So if you hear something you want us to follow up on, you want us to go deeper, or even if you just want us to comment on some of the challenges that you're going through right now, we will be hosting that Q&A at the end. But again, right down at the bottom of your screen, you could type those in and we will have those saved. So let us jump in and going to go over a little bit of an agenda. Remember, this is a live webinar. We will be sending out the recording after, so we hope you stay with us for the entire 45 minutes. If you have to jump off, we'll have that recording sent to you, and you could also share that with members of your team. So there are three parts to today's discussion, our roundtable discussion with Paul and myself. We're going to start with a fascinating underbuying analysis. It may just have been the silent killer of sales for the last few months. So we're going to go over what that means for your business and what the findings of this analysis that we did here at Management One. The second part of the webinar, we're going to go over maximizing cash flow as we move into 2025. So could we believe it? We're already well into November. The end of year is just upon us. So how do we really maximize cash flow? What do we need to do now to prepare for 2025? And then, of course, we're going to end with some Black Friday tips. And these tips are, of course, going to be through the lens of cash, cash, cash. If you know us here at Management One, you know that's our number one priority. So we're going to be talking Black Friday through the lens of cash and through the experienced mind of Paul Erickson. We're going to get some advice and we will go from there. So Paul, let's jump in with the underbuying dilemma. Now, I'm going to introduce this and then I'm going to ask you to jump in here, Paul. But we did a fascinating analysis, right? And one of the things that we, really have been hearing from our retailers over the past few months is, the election, the economy, sales are down, what's going on? And so we wanted to look under the hood and see what was happening, right? And so what we found is retailers were creating their own self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's pretty straightforward. If you are going to reduce your stock levels fairly dramatically, and I highlighted right here in fast fashion and women's fast fashion, we saw a year over year inventory decrease of more than 8%, right? And that important inflow in the last 90 days, year over year, we saw that dramatically down. So, what's going to happen when a retailer underbuys, right? When they're bringing in less inventory, sales will follow. So, Paul, I'm going to bring you in here in a minute because I know that one of the things that retailers love to kind of keep track of is when they're overbought, right? That's the inclination. Am I overbought? Am I overstocked? But what happens when the reverse is true? And I like to use that phrase, kind of the silent enemy is underbuying. So, Paul, I'm going to let you jump in here on some of the findings, especially around inflow.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been around a long time, and when I started out this business in the '80s and '90s, that's right, everyone, I'm that old. The most common inventory blunder was to be buying more inventory than you can digest. And there was an old saying, the more you got, the more you could sell. And if business was that easy, we'd all be millionaires as retailers. But that started to change, I think, in the last 10 years. And what I started to see, Dane, and you'll relate to this, um, is that I started to start talking to larger retailers, still family-owned businesses, but larger retailers that would hire inventory planners and buy inventory planning software, open to buy software. And they would let the plans be done by someone who, in my opinion, is not a merchant, but is a statistician. And there's a great story, Dane, that you know of a particular retailer on Long Island when I went out to see that were really complaining because sales were down and their whole thing was about cutting costs. And the night before I had the meeting with them, I went into one of their stores and it was I think the end of June, early July, and the store was empty of merchandise. It was full of shoppers, but had no merchandise. And so the next day in the meeting, I asked them, I go, I was in one of your stores and it seemed awful light on inventory. And the planner became very defensive and told me, Paul, as someone that's in the planning business, I'm surprised to hear you say that because we want to get our inventories low at the end of the season. We're in the shoulder season now. And so, we'll be gearing up with inventory as we get more into July, but right now we want the inventory low. And I said, that's fine. But I'm out here because sales are down and you're looking to cut costs as a solution. And when I went into one of your stores, you have no product and it's full of people. I mean, this isn't brain science. I mean, this is a and now I'm seeing this problem, Dane, and it's starting to metastasize throughout a lot of independent retailers. Not everyone, but we see it very, very often. We just got a new client that came back to us after hiring a planner that almost put her out of business because she cut the inventory too tight because she felt this was a game of a statistician game, and not a game for a merchant. Look, the biggest inventory blunder that a retailer can make today in 2024, going into 2025, is to underbuy new product and at the same time be overstocked of old product. I cannot tell you what a cancer that can become in a store. The idea that you can improve your cash flow by cutting purchases, unless you're a chronic overbuyer, and we don't see many of those anymore these days, cutting the influx of new products to improve your cash flow is truly a fool's errand.
Right. And I think the interesting part of that is, right, when you hear underbuying, you think you may just be lighter in stock. But the thing that happens is you end up holding on to merchandise longer. So you have older merchandise sitting on your floor because you need something to fill up the sales floor. So you hold on to those older goods longer. You're getting less fresh goods. Like you said, it's a fool's errand.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think, Dane, you have a slide on this where a study we did several years ago really even surprised us. And that study was that 90% of store sales. This is typically women's fashion boutique, but I'm going to tell you something. It doesn't change that much from vertical to vertical. But in women's fashion boutiques, your business, 90% of your business is being done from inventory less than 10 weeks old. And here's even the biggest kicker. And this one even surprised us even more. 50% of your business every month on the average is being done from merchandise that arrives in the month and is sold in the same month and never gets posted to an EOM inventory. 50%. If your store did $100,000 in sales last month, approximately $50,000 of those sales came from inventory that arrived on the 5th and were sold by the 20th. That's the power of hot merchandise. And when you think that by shutting that down or lowering that is going to improve your cash flow, that's what I call a fool's errand. You know, there are methods to be able to calculate this. There are metrics that you can use to find out if you are being an underbuyer or an overbuyer for that matter. And it's something that at Management One we believe in very strongly. In accounting, we have cost of goods sold, but it's a highly misleading metric when it comes to merchandising. What the most important metric is to look at is cost of goods purchased. Cost of goods purchased as a percentage is the key indicator whether you are underbuying or not. I was in a meeting with a client in Europe this morning, and the entire meeting, as we're coming to the end of the season, was about that stat on their Management One reports. And what we found is that many of their classifications throughout their stores were well under the percentage of cost of goods purchased that they needed to be, and sales were suffering. Essentially, in English, what that means, not Hungarian, Dane, and in English, what that means is you are not buying enough new product to drive the business to get your sales over your break even and create a positive cash flow. Now, maybe a one class or two class, that's okay, but for a business, it's not.
Okay, so Paul, I'm going to put this to you, right? And this is something I hear from retailers. You know, we both have the privilege of speaking with a lot of retailers over the course of weeks, months. Something that I hear is, how can I invest when the economy is so shaky? How can I, I'm not ready to buy at the levels that I used to buy at. I have a lot of uncertainty in the economy. What would you say to that?
Well, this has been, I think, a little bit more difficult year retail wise than even we at Management One had anticipated. I think we can all be honest about that. And in the past, I'm just going to say that I have always felt that a presidential election year is the cause of difficult business. It simply is not supported by facts. The last 16 presidential election years, 13 of those years, the economy was absolutely excellent and growing. But this was a little bit of a different season. So I think that could be part of it. But I think the major part is back to what we're talking about. And what you said is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there's no way you can know that until you can go into your data and find out if it's true. The data doesn't lie. The data simply doesn't lie. And it comes down to this: buying less needs to be done very, very carefully and very, very strategically. Otherwise, it will not only not work, but will put their store into a death spiral, in my opinion. I
Right.
mean, Dane, think about this: 50%. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to that stat. 50% of your sales every month are being driven by your receiving it that month. If you cut that back, what would be the natural response to sales?
Right.
It's going to go down. You won't have enough new product. Everybody, it is a common thing in human psychology. And if you take and if you know anything about human psychology, it is known as human beings look at something new as a way to benefit them in some way. And since I am a human being, last I checked, it benefited me in some way. I live in Minneapolis. I go to the car show every year, all excited about seeing new cars. I kind of walk away disappointed most of the years. But every year I'm excited about it. When we see something new, it releases a chemical called dopamine, and it's a neurotransmitter in our brain. It's the same neurotransmitter, it's the feel-good neurotransmitter, the same one that's released when we eat cake or have or with family and friends or see a funny movie. And so that idea that we're not going to show enough, we're going to cut back on what's new and hold on to what's already been voted on that they don't want to buy. The idea that slowing the turn down and cutting on what's new is going to help your cash flow, on the face of it, seems absurd.
Well, right. And Paul, I think that's the headline here, right? The instinct to, hey, if I spend less on inventory, I'm helping myself out. The headline is depressing your own sales never helped anyone's cash flow.
That's exactly right. That's right. But again, we're not being irresponsible about this. At Management One, it's you when we're talking about keeping the flow of new inventory in, we do need to have a budget on how much, what is the right amount. We're not just talking about just, going out and buying willy-nilly. We need to know how much and where. We need to focus on what we're really good at, what our customers are looking for us for, what the look the that is what we need to do. And so we're talking about doing it strategically, but what we see too often is a general cutback in an idea that that's going to improve your cash flow when the exact opposite happens.
Yeah, and this is when I think we get into, a narrow and deep merchandising strategy,
Yes,
especially during these times. If you focus aggressively on the categories that are actually producing good turns, solid cash ROI, giving you a good CMROI, a good cash margin return on investment, that's where you want to invest your dollars. Where you could get hurt is if you're investing your dollars in non-productive classes.
right. And I think, well, we're going to get into the idea of markdowns in the next second, are we? But I know you want to talk about bananas.
Yeah, I just love this example. This is my like silly example, but it's the brown banana visual, right? And if you go into your supermarket, you want to see that there is, a great amount of green bananas on the top so that you can buy them and have them in your home and they're going to ripen. And then there are going to be some yellow, and at the bottom, the brown bananas, there should be a few there that someone wants to take home from banana bread. If you walk into your store and there's not the freshness and you just have a bunch of brown bananas sitting there, that is old merchandise on your floor that's just been hanging around, and you're not replacing it with new merchandise fast enough. So it's just my favorite visual of kind of this dilemma. So, Paul, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. And we're definitely going to get into markdowns a bit later. I know that that's a controversial topic that we love to talk about, but now we want to talk about maximizing cash flow, right? So we're coming up to the end of the year. It'll be here before you know it. 2025. Who would have thought? And we're in that kind of home stretch of preparing for year end. So there are two questions that we really want to ask. And then I'm going to flip to the next slide and we'll kind of dig into this a little bit. But where will you be on January 1st? And where do you need to be on January 1st? So, Paul, can you kind of go into some detail of what retailers need to know now to set them up for success come January 1?
This is uh, such an important topic. And I had an interest, I'm going to tell a story. And it was recently, I had dinner with a retail consultant, and he was talking about a client that he was working with here in the Twin Cities. I live in Minneapolis, St. Paul, who is very successful, and they're owned by a much, much, much larger retailer with hundreds of stores around the country. And when he is in the meeting with the CEO and founder of the large chain of women's fashion stores, um, what he zeroes in on, the owner zeroes in on, is what is my position on inventory going to be in the future? I know how much I have now. I know my trend on sales. How much more is coming, and where should I be on July 1? And the discussion now, Dane, we're having is Where do I need to be on January 1? Those are numbers that are absolutely essential. And my friend told me, he goes, if we are off, if we don't miss those inventory targets, if we miss those inventory targets, that creates a highly uncomfortable meeting with the owner. It is everything to them because it's all in your cash, your inventory. A typical boutique will spend 50% or more of their sales in inventory, and how to manage it and where you want to be at the end of the year. Probably, I'm going to say 95% of our clients at Management One, Dane, are their fiscal year is the calendar year. It ends in about 7 or 8 weeks from now. And do we know exactly where we'll be in those 7 or 8 weeks in terms of our inventory position? Because in regards to that, where you end your year has an absolutely major impact on three areas of your business. Your cash flow, obviously, profitability. Too much inventory at the end of the year is going to result in too many markdowns in January and February. And last, but certainly not least, tax ramifications. So the question is now, what do we own today? How much can we anticipate selling between now and the end of the year? How much more inventory is coming? And what would that put our inventory position on December 31st? And is that position on inventory higher than a year ago, lower than a year ago, or about the same? Because if it is higher, that creates the massive 3-point problem: cash flow, profitability, and taxes.
Yeah, and I just want to flag something here, because it's something that I notice, again, when speaking to retailers, that there almost becomes, and this is not for everyone, this is, a handful of retailers that I speak with, who get a little fearful about checking these numbers. They actually are a little bit fearful, right? And they think that, hey, if I just don't look at it, if I don't look at the problem, maybe the problem doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's
But
like losing my weight. If I don't get on the scale, I don't have to worry about it.
exactly. But the truth is it's going to catch up with you. And that day it's going to catch up
Right.
with you is
It
Jan 1.
doesn't, me not getting on the scale doesn't make me thinner. In fact, not knowing about it doesn't make me fatter. But I'm not defensive about my weight, although I'm working on it. Okay.
You look great, Paul. You look great. You're doing great. But yeah, so I think that this is so important, right? And you said something to me that really stuck out, as we were discussing this roundtable, was that professional retailers are laser focused on their stock levels come December 31st. They are laser focused to that finish line.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'll tell you another story. So, and this is also important when it comes to year tax planning at the end of the year. Um, do you have a good accountant? I am always amazed at how many retailers, Dane, we talk to that tell the same story. And you can probably have as many stories about this as I do, where we get it. And these are multi-million-dollar retailers who say, yeah, I need a good accountant, or I had to fire my accountant. They didn't understand retail. The fact of the matter is, most accountants do not understand retail. Having a good accountant is right up there with the other two absolute necessities in life if you're a man. My dad taught me this. It was, Paul, have a good accountant, make sure you have a navy blazer, and make sure you have regularity. Those are the three. So having a good accountant is so important. Look, tax laws are constantly changing. New legislation sometimes can provide a chance to reduce your taxes, but if you don't have a good tax accountant that you're working with, go get one right now, and one that also understands this concept: ending inventories and how they affect your cost of goods sold at the end of the year.
Okay, so Paul, so we're going to do this exercise. If you've been following our content for a while, if you've been on our webinars, you may have seen this before, but I think it's a great example. And again, one of the questions that I get a lot from retailers as we're speaking to them, as they're, new clients, even existing clients, is I don't get it. My sales are up. I'm doing great. My accountant tells me that my gross margin is doing really well, but I'm not feeling it in my bank account. So could you walk us
Let
through
me
this?
look. I got one. So many years ago, when I was a young man, everybody needs on the call needs to understand that when Dane was a little child, I used to rock him to sleep telling him retail bedtime stories. So this is how old I am. But when I was getting started in this business, I remember I got a client here in Minneapolis, and the son was taking over from the father. And we had our first meeting in their conference room. And the father comes in, who was getting ready to retire, and he sits down and he tells me, Paul, business is tough. This is in 1982. He goes, business is getting tough out there. So this is 40 some years ago. Uh, uh, and he goes, I'm glad my son has hired you to come in because he needs the help, and I want this business to succeed and to go on after I'm gone. You know, Paul, I can remember when business was so easy that we used to make so much money that I had to go to the bank and take out a loan just to pay the taxes on all the money I was making. I sat there in stunned silence thinking about that statement for quite a while. And I've been thinking about that statement for the last 40 years. Why do you have to get a loan to pay on taxes, your taxes, if you're making all this money? And what this is going to show you, and what Dane's going to go through, Dane and I are going to go through, is explain to you how this happens in a retail store.
Okay, so we have a retail business. Let's use a nice round number. They have sales of $1 million a year, successful retailer. Let's go through this. So, Paul, we have
All right, so let's go through one line. This is gap accounting principles in terms of calculating your profitability. So we take your beginning inventory at cost. Let's say it's a $250,000. We add in how much merchandise you bought over the course of the year. Say it's $700,000. We then subtract from those two figures the ending inventory, 350,000, and what we have is your cost of goods sold on $1 million, $600,000. Now we take your sales of $1 million and take the cost of goods sold, subtract that, and we get the gross profit of $400,000. We take the gross profit and subtract the expenses, which we say in this example is 350,000, and voila, high five, great success. We made $50,000 pre-tax profit, which we will pay a tax on, depending on your tax bracket. If you're in a tax bracket of 30%, you will pay a tax of $15,000. Go and get into your wallet and pony up. Now let's follow the cash. That's the same numbers we just gave you when you're making all this money. And so what does the bank account say? Cash in and cash out. Cash in cash out is purchases of merchandise and your expenses, correct? So we have that. And then cash in is sales, $1 million. This is simplistic. Cash out, 700,000 in purchases of merchandise, 350,000, that's your rent, that's your payroll, that's your advertising. That all totaled to be $1,050,000. That's the same store that had to write a check to Uncle Sam for $15,000 or for whatever percentage your tax bracket's in. You had to write a check. You still owe the vendors because I'm assuming you're still paying your employees. You still owe the vendors 50,000 and have a zippo, nada, nothing in your checking account, and that's why you go to the bank to get a loan to pay for the tax bill on all that money you're making. Now, how does this happen? And this is purely happening because we were not paying attention to how much we were buying and where we ended the year. If you recall in the first statement, our beginning inventory was 250, but what was our ending inventory? 350. That's why at the end of the year, if your inventory is much higher than where you start, that is going to create this imaginary profitability that's showing on paper that you don't see in your bank account.
And so right, these are numbers that we need to know, right? They're available to us. We need to know it. And that's why planning, this example right here stresses the importance of why we need to have that target inventory for Jan 1. And I had it up there before, but I think we like to do this, instead of we speak a lot in general terms, and I want to give a kind of actual target for retailers. So Paul, that number that we want to target, and this is a rule of thumb, right? It's going to change business to business, but if you're struggling with, hey, where should I be on January 1st? A good rule of thumb is your cost of inventory should be somewhere between 5 to 10% of your expected annual sales.
So let me expound upon that. That was a number that I always used in my life for a fashion boutique. Now, if you this would change if you have a store in Naples, Florida, where your business is absolutely taking off on January 1. So if you have a seasonal business, that's going to be different. But if you're in most of the United States and Canada, and you have a business that inventory is perishable and is seasonal, and it is as in a fashion store, you don't want to end your year with too much inventory, which causes obviously you had to pay for that inventory. It hasn't been sold yet, and you have to now mark it down, which affects profitability. And so, what's a good should you be? And so, what Dane was saying is, and let's just say, let's if you have $1 million business, let's say you have a boutique that does $1 million, you put in your own number. But as a rough number to guide, if you do $1 million on and your ending inventory that you count at cost should be about $50,000. Now compare that to your business. And if it's considerably higher than that, and if you're not a management one client, as they say, we should talk.
Yeah.
But that's where it should be.
Yeah, so as we prepare for year end, and I think that again, these are one of the things that sometimes we're not thinking about. There's the obvious ramifications of going into January over inventory, but we cannot forget the importance of the tax ramifications. So I'm glad that you
Well,
kind of
I'm going to tell another story real quick, Dane, before we go on. And remember, Dane, you were worried about this filling 45 minutes. I think you can put that worry away. So I had a client in Minneapolis here for many, many years. She was a wonderful woman. And we ended up getting her sales up to about 1.8 million boutique. And when we first started, I kept talking about this idea of don't have so much inventory to count at the end of the year. You're paying a tax on it. So she started having big sales between Christmas and New Year's. She wanted to make sure she get that inventory as low as possible. So when she finally sold the store, which was about, I think, 9, 10 years ago, she wanted to retire. She sold the store. The new buyer who I talked to and became a client, the new buyer said, "Yeah, when I told how much I was paying for the store, and I think she was paying like $700,000 or $800,000 cash for the business, right?" And she said, and when she showed the books to her accountant, the accountant looked at the ending inventory, and the ending inventory was about $45,000. And he looks at her and he goes, "I don't get it. What are you paying for? The inventory is only $45,000." And then she had to explain to him what she's paying for was the net pre-tax profit of $280,000 cash every year that business spun off. That's what you're paying for, not the inventory. The inventory is a liability until you sell it, pure and simple. And the older that inventory gets, the greater liability it becomes. So
okay.
people are
So
really, I hope heads aren't spinning out there, Dane, right now.
no, I love it. Listen, it's always story time when we talk with Paul. And listen, it really helps put this all into perspective, right? And there's a lot of retailers here in different life stages of their business. So this is just all great information. And we want to just give some other tips for preparing for year end as you're coming into these final months of the year. Receiving, right? If you have a receiving windows, right? If you have cancel dates on your orders, if orders arrive past those cancel dates and you do not need the merchandise, this is a big star here, a big asterisk. If you do not need the merchandise, don't accept it, right? You have to be your own advocate. You have to be your fiercest fiercest protector of your business. So if vendors are trying to ship you stuff at, mid-November that was supposed to arrive on November 1, and that was the cancel date, don't accept it if you don't need it, right? Of
I got
course.
another one for you, Dane. I got another one. I'm sorry to interrupt. I got another one for you, Dane. You get something in on December 27th, and let's say it's transitional spring merchandise, and it comes in on December 20th or 25th, or that's Christmas, 26th. If it comes in then, don't open the damn box because you're going to get taxed on it. Don't, and if you open it, don't count it in your inventory. Okay. These are all very important tax tips. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dane.
No, that's good. That's like that could give you a retail horror movie. Don't open the box. I like the so yeah, so that's actually great advice, right? We don't want to receive that inventory into the system. And
Dane, one other thing too, Dan. Sorry to interrupt again. People are going to hate me who are listening to this, but the drop dead date for any receiving in December is an important date. By the way, I just want to point out. I always use December 11th. You know why?
how's that, Paul?
That's my birthday. Well, please don't get me anything too extravagant this year. Don't embarrass me.
For all attendees, we'll be putting Paul's personal mailing address in here. You could feel free to send him a gift on December 11th. Thank you for that, Paul. And another tool, because we're going to talk about markdowns, but another tool that we have in our tool belt, right? And this goes back to being your own fiercest advocate of your business, right? You're in a relationship with your vendors. It's stuff that lands, is not selling if it doesn't fit, if it's not getting a reaction. Try to swap merchandise with your vendors. Try an RTV. You want to be proactive in getting things out of your business that are not performing. So we want to take advantage of every tool in our tool belt. So as we're preparing for year end, we want to make sure that we have in our back pocket those swap opportunities, our TVs. It's really important. Let's get out of the merchandise that's not working. See if your vendors could get back into stuff that is working. And we'll hear this all the time. Hey, you know what? I have some jackets from a vendor. They're not fitting right. You call the vendor. Well, everyone else is selling them. Great, take them back. Go sell them to someone else. They're not working for my business.
What just happened?
What?
That just happened actually with a small store, and you don't have to be big. This is a small store in Colorado. Same thing. She had jackets. The sleeves are too short. Couldn't sell them. So she called the rep. She said, "Can you take them back?" And she said, "Well, gee, I don't. But everybody else is selling them." So I go, "Well, let's call her bluff. Tell them that you'd like to. If everybody's just selling them, they want more. Send them back in for not for a refund, but for an exchange for other jackets that hopefully will sell well." And they did.
And I will just say one thing, as someone who was a former sales rep for a big men's apparel brand, okay? RTV swaps, right? The truth of the matter was, it wasn't my biggest accounts that I was doing RTVs for or swaps for. It was the small independent retailers, and the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It was the people that would pick up the phone and call me and hound me, and I'd come through for them, So you want to make sure that you're advocating for your own business. It's a tool. So Paul, as we wrap up here, and then we're going to leave some time for questions and answers. So again, make sure at the bottom, if you have questions, start filling them in now so that Paul and I can answer them at the end. We'll take 15 minutes at the end to answer those questions. So there's a Q&A button at the end. I see some coming in. Please, we'd love to hear from you. Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, or if you want a story from Paul, any requests, you could make them. So let's talk Black Friday. So we talked a little bit about underbuying, the ramifications about underbuying, but we still have a lot of retailers out there that are coming into this holiday season overstocked, just with way too much merchandise. So what do we do going into Black Friday? And there's a lot of resources out there for how to approach Black Friday, tips and tricks. And what we're going to focus on, though, is how we can view this through the lens of, again, coming into January as inventory efficient as possible and generating cash. So first off, let's talk about highlighting holiday focused items, right? So this is about selling those great new holiday arrivals at full price. Make sure you are merchandising your floor and clearly labeling, with signage, with presentation, with tables, what are new holiday items, right? And direct your customer, right? Best holiday gifts for mom, best holiday gifts for your teacher. We want to make this easy for the customer. They have a lot to do, they have a lot of shopping that's going to take place. So, with new merchandise, right? Because remember, not everything is just sale on Black Friday, right? And so, that new great holiday merchandise that we want them to shop, those new arrivals, give them a focus, right? So make this as easy as possible. Gift guides, the works, right? We really want to make sure that we're guiding them and making this easy. Paul, anything to add there?
No, I think that's really good advice. And I know on your next bullet point, Dane, I see you have maintenance markdowns. I'm going to jump in real quick about that. Markdowns are meant to be taken aggressively. Too many retailers think that if they take a small markdown quickly, that'll move an item, and it won't. If it's wrong, it's really wrong typically. And stop thinking you're going to try to milk out a profit. Everything, when markdowns are being taken, and it doesn't matter whether it's now or in June, when you take markdowns, you have to think, how fast can I sell this at the highest price? But it'll sell it quickly. It'll be out within a week or two. Don't think about profit, think about cash flow all the time when you take your markdowns.
Yes, cash flow is king here. We'll talk about that at the end. But why we say maintenance markdowns now, right? You want to have these markdowns set on your floor, right? Things that have come in, more than, if you're a women's apparel store, right? More than 8 to 10 weeks ago, stuff that is already, starting to get stale. We want to take those markdowns before Black Friday, right? We want to have them set on our floor. And here's why. A great technique, and to Paul's point, 20% is not a markdown. That's not, if there was not demand for that product, 20% off is not generating Black Friday level demand. So we want to be aggressive with our markdowns. And then Black Friday gives us an opportunity that one day to do a sale on sale, a topper, right? So let's say we have a rack of markdowns, we can do an additional 20% off sale, an additional 25% off sale. We want to move that merchandise. We talked about the ramifications of walking into Jan 1 over inventoried. These are your opportunities to really move stale merchandise that is slow moving, that does not have demand for it. We are creating demand through our markdowns, okay? Re-merchandising the store. So we want to get it holiday theme. We want to get it, we go back to that idea of creating tables, creating pockets of, hey, I know stores that open up some of their back sections of the store to a sale area, right? We really want to make sure that when the customer walks in for holiday season, they're seeing something new, they're seeing something exciting. Bucket pricing, I'm just going to talk about bucket pricing real quick. It is so important that, especially during the holiday season, right? When there's a lot of sales, a lot of promotional activity happening, we have a lot of competition from retailers, that if there is merchandise, and I tell this to retailers all the time, especially merchandise that's been sitting there, that we're talking about the old merchandise, 6 months or older, move it to a bucket price. So what I mean by that is, if original retail value was $100, move it to $50, $40, $30. Get it on a rack in a bin, and let's price point it. You should have a $5, $10, $20, up to $50 rack or bin. And we want to make it really easy for the customer to see that merchandise and not even have to make a thought on it, right? So you see something 60% off, you're making calculations, just move it to a bucket price. This should be your last stop on the train. It should be the most aggressive. So again, if the retail value is $100, I want to see that sitting at $40, $30. And again, it's the cash over the margin. And this is for your older merchandise. It's going to surprise and delight the customer. It makes it really easy. You could, bin it. You can mark it by size racks. A $20 rack, small to medium to large to extra large, it's all there. Customer could come up, see what's on the $20 rack, make a purchase. It's a great final sale item as they're shopping in your stores. And then lastly, we want to keep really tight on what categories are moving or slow movers, and we want to do promotions based on slow moving categories, right? So if we know that denim is a really slow mover and we are over inventoried and our turn is really dragging, that may be a great place on Black Friday to do a buy one get one half off all denim, right? So we can take, these kind of doorbuster moments on Black Friday and tie them to the categories that really need it. Not, and I repeat this, not just doing a general, it's 40% off the whole store. That benefits no one.
Oh, no, that's my nightmare. I want to get back to bucket pricing. What Dane just said is absolutely critical. And the consumer responds to a known price, then a percentage off. If you take anything from this presentation today, take this. If you are doing 30, 40% off sales, I would encourage you to stop doing it now. You will find that if you start doing what Dane just said, and just you can put a rack up and say, you're promoting shorts, $12.99 and up. So you're giving him the that $12.99 price point, but then you put and up. So, but don't have shorts there for $80 with it too, because that's misleading. But you don't have to have everything on the rack at $12.99. But you're giving them the price. Dana's saying everything in this rack $40, everything in this rack $30. That makes it easy for the customer to shop. They will respond better, and you will improve your cash flow by clearing inventory more efficiently if you do that.
Yeah, especially on that old merchandise. Don't be afraid with old merchandise. This is the time we want to clean house. And if you're understocked, we kind of went through that situation. If you're kind of light on inventory, there are still ways to stimulate people to shop on Black Friday that is not just based on markdowns and promotional. So, Paul, I know we're getting a little tight on time, so I do want to give that Chubby's example that you gave because I thought it was so fantastic.
Yeah, well, Chubby's, this is a great one. Chubby's, you can go on their website. They sell swim trunks and shorts, and they had a great Black Friday promotion last year, I thought. And they're kind of known for their sort of tongue-in-cheek sense of humor. And if you know me, that's what I'm known for too. And they played into that in their promo, which is, I think, always a good idea. They're promoting their sports, they called it. And part of the relevant copy about the promotion of their Schwartz for Black Friday was there was about eating too much turkey for Thanksgiving, and it was a very very clever, funny ad and funny promotion. But the best part of what they did is that the consumer was typically are drawn in by the copy that they never noticed that the shorts they were promoting were at full price. They didn't even mark them down. What they did was the copy said only a hot 29.50, said the promo. 29.50 is the price. But if and the one thing you have as a retailer is you have great power. I often call retailers are like Spider-Man. They have great power and comes with great responsibility. If you tell the consumer what if that you can tell them if that's a good price or not. And guess what? For the most part, shoppers believe you. And so with in Chubby's case, Dane, they said, now only on 29.50, that wasn't a markdown price. That was their regular price. If your brand personality, it can call for it. Try to make your promotions fun and lighthearted. And sometimes it doesn't mean you even have to take a markdown at all.
Right. So a great example of that could be gifts for mom starting at $15.
Yeah.
And that could have been a price that already existed. It's not a markdown price, but it's showing, hey, we have some great low price items at a great value. And you're kind of switching it up there with the retail, with the marketing messaging. It's playing with a little bit of some great consumer mindset there. And then just real quickly, a return in January gift certificate. So what does that look like? I'm sure a lot of you have tried this out before. You spend $100 with us in the holiday season, we'll give you a $25 gift card to come back and shop with us in January. So that is giving them something, right? They feel like the customer is getting something, but it's actually stimulating them to come back in, spend with you in January when there's going to be a lot of sale on the floor, and let them come by sale in January with that $25 gift card when you're going to be your slowest month for some retailers and a big promotional month that you could get rid of some merchandise. So that's always a great strategy, or of course, gift with purchases, that as well. So as we wrap up here, Paul, where we really want to think about this year end. We want to reward your customer for their business over the year. We want to surprise and delight them with sales, promotions, activities, events, and take advantage of all opportunities. We have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Small Business Saturday. Our partners at the Boutique Hub really promote Pink Friday. There's a lot of opportunity for event-driven shopping.
Don't forget December 11th as well. December 11th as well.
Yes, December 11th as well. Sorry, Paul, your audio is going out there a little bit.
My birthday.
Yes, of course.
Don't send me anything too expensive, though. That's all I.
And then, Paul, just talk us through this inventory clearance start date, and then we will wrap up here and go to questions.
Well, it was like the client here in Minneapolis that decided to run their clearance sale right after Christmas. Now, some people won't do that because of returns and things like that, but it actually worked out beautifully for them. And in the UK and then in Canada as well, they call the day after Christmas Boxing Day, and it has nothing to do with pugilism, by the way. It has to do with just back in London, when they ran a sale, they would have they would sell they would customer would buy so much they had to put it in a box, and so that's essentially where the name Boxing Day came from. But you can run really great promotions right after Christmas, and it also enables you to get your inventory lowered before you count it at the end of the year.
Yeah, and when we say clearance, right, do not be afraid to be aggressive if you need to be. So wrapping up, we want to remind you, do not depress your sales by lack of fresh merchandise. If you need merchandise in certain categories, in certain areas of your business that are performing, buy what you need. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do not wait until the end of the year to address inventory overages. We want to start thinking about this now. We want to know where we need to be on January 1st, and we want to start taking action as we lead into Black Friday and the promotional events that are going to be coming up, right? We want to be prepared for this. We don't want to be on the defense, at the end of December. Have an inventory goal to start January, build a cash flow projection, and then finally, do not be afraid of markdowns. We want to start thinking in terms of cash over margin. We did some great examples earlier in the presentation. This is about generating cash, reducing your tax liability, bringing you into January as inventory efficient as possible. Don't get hung up on the margin. I can't mark it down more than 50%. I can't. You want that cash, and then we could go back and spend what you brought in for great new merchandise for the year ahead. So we have some questions. I'm going to open this up. Paul, any last words before we open up for questions?
No, I just one last thing for Mark. This year, December 11th falls on a Wednesday, just for everyone to know. That's my birthday, Dane.
Okay. All right, Paul. So we have Andrea Evans. What does RTV stand for? Return to vendor. So that is a return to vendor. That's going to be if, again, you have merchandise that's just not working. It arrived on the floor. There's many reasons you could want to return something to vendor. Usually there's an issue with fit. There's an issue with sizing. It's not, or maybe your sell-through just isn't there and your customer is not responding and it's been on the floor for some time. Get on the phone with your vendor, ask them to swap, ask them if you could do a return. You know what? It never hurts to ask. And from Sarah B, we have, what do you do if La Nina is ruining your sales? The outside temperature won't come down and our customer can't look at sweaters. Timing issue, lucky we get the ladies from the northern states are buying our sweaters. So the weather, Paul, what do we do if the weather's not cooperating with us?
Well, the weather is the biggest problem for retailers. It's not the economy, generally speaking. There's only been 3 events in our economy in the last 25 years that affected retail, and that was 9/11, to a lesser extent, but still affected all of retail, 2008 in the recession. And of course, the big McGillicuddy, the pandemic. The real effect on business is weather. It always has been and it always will be. Look, my experience is if you've got beautiful sweaters, you'll sell them if it's 90 degrees out. I can give you story by story about stores in Nashville, stores in Dallas, Fort Worth, where the weather's been very, very hot in Texas, and their sweater business has been outstanding in August, even as well as September. It will get cool. The women will buy in advance. So um, uh, be patient with that. If they're not buying your sweaters right now, take a long look at the sweaters themselves.
Okay, and then I saw someone raise their hand. I don't know if you can type in a question down below. We will take one more moment before we wrap this up officially, but I did see someone raise their hand. So if you have a question, just type it in. There should be a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Before we go, I do want to say that we have a very exciting in our series. This is our year-end webinar roundtable discussions. Our next one is coming up on the 22nd with Mark Weiss, the founder of Management One and one of the most brilliant minds in inventory planning, period. It's going to be a real pleasure to sit down with him. We're aiming for a 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will be sending out a lot of communication on that, but that is next up in our year-end webinar series. He's going to be focusing even deeper on that financial planning aspect, tax ramifications, how to prep for the year ahead. So that is really exciting. We cannot wait to have Mark host that for us, and we may even have a few other special guests. And then finally, we have one last question from Lori. Lori, how much is too much when doing promos and offerings? That's going to really range from retailer to retailer. What I will say is, right, there is a ton of promotions going around. You want to make sure you are doing what you need to do to get you to that end of year inventory, right? So the key here, I think, is being more aggressive in the places that matter, right? So it's that same concept between a wide and thin strategy versus a narrow and deep. If you sprinkle around a 30% discount anywhere, it's not going to mean that much. Target the areas that are really sensitive in your business, areas that are overstocked, the areas that aren't moving, and go in for the kill on those, right? And so that's where you want to focus your promotional energy. You really want to make sure you're still highlighting new arrivals and new goods. And so how much is too much? I would say focus most aggressively on the areas that need it and don't be afraid to go deep. And then finally, we have from Claudia. Claudia, glad you got your question in. We love the 2 slides regarding tax ramifications. Can you post those again? Claudia will be sending this out as a recording. It'll be in your inbox so that you can run through this webinar. You could, of course, contact Paul or myself. We'll reach out as well to make sure you get a copy of the presentation. So with that, we are coming to the end of the hour. I want to thank everyone who attended today. We know that time is precious in these last months of the year, and we appreciate you spending your time with us today. We hope you learned something. We hope you got a laugh or two from one of Paul's incredible stories. He's available for birthday parties, anniversaries, bat mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs,
Yeah, yeah.
and Christmas parties. So Paul, any last words before we say goodbye
Now,
to
it was, on a very serious note, a lot of what we talked about is very, very important, and it's always great to be on these webinars with my good friend Dane. So it was a lot of fun.
My pleasure, Paul. It's an honor.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all our clients who attended. And if anyone is not a Management One client and wants to learn more, you feel free to contact us. We'll be sending you some follow-ups from this. We'd love to see how we could work together. There is still time to get your business in order as we walk into January 1st. So we're here to help, we're here to support, and we will see everyone for the next webinar series on the 22nd.